Joined now by Mike Rogers, former Republican congressman and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you. Thanks for the time. Let's start with these latest intelligence reports that say this attack is imminent. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, obviously they went across the border. There's hard to say that pouring troops into the Donbass region is not much of an invasion. They don't own that area, and now they have lots of troops there, and they've flooded the zone, if you will. And they're also escalating their cyber attacks across the country of Ukraine to try to destabilize it. They're doing information operations in Kyiv as we speak. So all of the indicators are that no matter what he says, he certainly has strategic objectives. Is it all the way to Kyiv? I think that's probably debatable. But eastern Ukraine, remember, there's a large population of ethnic Russians, speak Russian, east of the Dnieper River, which kind of splits it in half, which is all the things that Putin wants. It would give him a buffer. It gives him access to the aerospace industry that he lost. It gives him access to where those engine plants were that used to build Russian, intercontinental ballistic missiles. So, yeah, listen, I think there's more that he wants. I think Mariupol is probably next. It's a strategic port in the south that would kind of make the Azov Sea, that is off of the Black Sea, very strategic for him militarily, makes him strong, makes it hard to unseat him. So all of those things are going through his mind. I think he is planning more territory to take. I think just the question now is how much of Ukraine does he really want?
What do you think the U.S. could or should be doing differently, Congressman?
Well, I would be giving them all the anti-armor, anti-air defense that we could muster to get into the country and allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves. You know, the Russians are going to have overwhelming force. If they decide to do a big land movement in Ukraine, it's going to be something we haven't seen since World War II. They have positioned long-range artillery, pretty lethal. They have missile batteries. There's an incident back in July of last year where they did attack a battalion-sized unit in Ukraine with these missile batteries and eliminated it in about 2 minutes. I mean, what's coming is huge. It's sophisticated, and they're going to need all the help that they can get, they being the Ukrainians, to defend themselves. I would be sending as much of that to them as humanly possible. You have to change Putin's calculus. And right now, we drib, we drab, we kind of talk about it. We tell everybody, well, they're coming, but we're not doing the things to make him change his calculus. And until we do that, he's going to strategically keep taking pieces of Ukraine that advantage Vladimir
Right.
Putin.
I mean, well, sanctions clearly haven't worked, and he knew they were coming because President Biden told him they were coming. That didn't stop him. And it looks like he has no interest in any kind of diplomatic solution. He's moving full speed ahead, no matter what we threaten him with, as far as sanctions anyway.
Yeah, well, here's the thing on sanctions, and we knew this going into this. A few years ago, he started kind of telegraphing what he was thinking about. He asked all his oligarchs to start bringing money back into Russia. He's amassed something, I've seen numbers from 600, let's just say high as $600 billion to $1 trillion in cash reserves. Mm-hmm. And why you do that because he knew that people were going to get cut off from their cash reserves around the world if he did something like this, sanctions. And so he did a couple of other things. He's kind of reformed this strong alliance with China, including natural resource agreements, including up in the Arctic, where China would help them develop certain pieces in the Arctic. And for that, they would get a large share of those natural resources, natural gas and oil. And when you start thinking about these deals, when you cut off the Nord Stream 2, yep, that hurts. But he's prepared for this, and China is committed to buying all of it. So all of that was done in girding up for any sanctions regime. So we're dribbling there as well. We're saying, well, we're going to get your oligarchs. Well, a few years ago, he said that he was going to prepare that by bringing these cash reserves in, and he did that. So, my argument is, if we believe he's serious, if you believe a country is violating the sovereignty of a people that want to be free, then, short of sending U.S. troops in, we should do everything possible. I'd ramp up the sanction regime. The one big club left in his bag is access to the international banking system. It's called SWIFT. if you do that, boy, that is going to leave a mark. And now it does throw him into the arms of China for sure, and he's already there anyway, I would argue.
Yeah,
but that would hurt him a bunch.
It's interesting, Congressman. There's a new AP poll that says just 26% of Americans say the U.S. should play a major role in this conflict. What does that say to you?
Well, I don't know if anyone is actually explaining what a major role would be. I mean, I think most people have this vision that it's U.S. tanks and U.S. troops coming over the border in the 101st Airborne Division,
right,
doing their work in Ukraine. I think when people hear that, that's what their response is. But if you went back and I think rephrased that and said, hey, don't you think that we should have some role in supporting these freedom fighters in Ukraine, trying to keep Vladimir Putin from creating another international war across Europe? I think most people would go, well, maybe that's okay. Yeah. And so I think how you describe it, and this is where I fault the Biden administration. I mean, literally, they've been running around saying, oh, they're going to invade, they're going to invade, they're going to invade. And, of course, we all knew that they had plans to do this, but they weren't doing these preparatory things about why it's important. Why should we care if Russia moves into Ukraine? There's lots of reasons to care, like Poland and Latvia and Lithuania, that we have defense agreements with. I mean, if they start thinking about Poland, we've got a big problem. We are going to be in a land war. We want to avoid all of that. So what should we be doing? We should be doing everything we can to make every soldier in Ukraine and their civilian corps that's now signing up in droves, give them what they need to defend themselves. Right. And that includes fighting back on these missile and air defense systems, providing air defense systems in a way we haven't before.
Great insight. Former Congressman Mike Rogers, who chaired the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.